everybody. Welcome to our 4 of 4 Joint Service Club meetings hosted here at Mount Marty. Thank you for coming today. Like I said, this is our 4th meeting we've had. We had 2 in the fall, we've had 2 in the winter. We've had everything from topics of, what have we had? State of education from Yankton Public Schools on Mount Marty. We've had a nice, neat presentation from Larry Pressler, more of a federal government kind of presentation, a really neat story on the federal prison. We've had city government / economic development as our 3rd meeting. And to round this out, as we kind of formed this together between Lions Club, Sertoma Club, Rotary Club, Optimist Club, we thought that a nonprofit would be another angle, and kind of United Way certainly covers the umbrella of the nonprofit. So, yes, Tom?
Started out with rounds with the first club.
Well, that wasn't the joint one, but that's
Yeah, it was. That was the first one.
Whatever. I wasn't there. Okay? I wasn't there. It didn't happen. Anyway, Dave Spencer with the Optimist Club, also with Mount Marty business instructor up here, having a great time leading students, teaching students, having a great time with that. And so, obviously, service is taught a lot up here at Mount Marty. And I always get questions from students when they see people walking through here and coming to these other 3 meetings, and now it'll be a 4th meeting. What's going on in the South Dining Room? So, it's fun to tell them what's going on in different activities. Of course, we take this as an extension of the classroom. We take it back to the classroom of what's going on in the community. So, obviously, a lot of news in the community right now, but just also wanted to just point out that I think from talking with the other service clubs that we'll repeat this again next year. I think it's been a good opportunity. The goal was to have people like Jesse Baile, our featured speaker today, come and speak to make it one big group rather than splitting all 4 of these service clubs. And of course, some of the lessons we learned in our entrepreneurship class, which I had last year, as we talked about service clubs and how do we continue to survive. Because I'll remind you, the Kiwanis Club died last year after its 100th year due to lack of members. Right? So we have to keep that in mind with service clubs, and then also maybe it's an opportunity for how service clubs can work together on projects to benefit our community. So a lot of good things to come out of, I think, obviously coming together as a big group. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jesse Baile, Director of United Way, 2016 graduate of Mount Marty, so back on home campus. Wife Amy is here today too, graduate of Mount Marty. So that's awesome. That's awesome. So again, tell you what, the college year is moving quite quickly. We started on Monday, January 6th. I think I had about half of my students sick on Wednesday, January 8th. And we've been battling everything up here. We've had COVID, we've had strep throat, we've had influenza A, influenza B, pneumonia, mono. And so far, the teachers, right, Lashman, you had a little sickness. Lashman, business department as well, here as well, we've been trying to get through all that. But the calendar for the colleges, so you know, the graduation is the first weekend in May. So we're not that far away of that. Things are kind of moving at a fast pace here. But without further ado, I'd like to, do you want to start off the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance? If I can get you to stand, and I'll lead us in the pledge, and we'll have Jesse take it from there. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so if you'll help me welcome Jesse Baile, we'll get on with our meeting. Jesse, all yours.
All right, the timing for this is right about 45 minutes, so I will try and stick to it and get us out of here on time. Good afternoon and welcome, and for those who don't know me, I'll do a brief history of my time and experiences in this amazing community, hopefully convincing you that I'm somewhat qualified to be presenting on this topic today. And I have to start, as always, just sharing a little bit about my family. They are my main support. So my lovely wife Amy, as Dave already pointed out, our 3 boys, Owen, Miles, Oliver, and our dog Chloe. Amy and I believe in our hearts that just below each other and our children, our community deserves our energy and attention. These 3 boys continue to motivate us to do our part in creating a better future, not only for them, but for all youth and for the rest of the people of our community. Currently, Amy serves on the Stewart Elementary PTA and is a longtime board member of Keep Yankton Beautiful while operating her own independent graphic design firm and serving our country in the South Dakota Air National Guard. And then, in addition to the numerous roles that I hold with United Way, I have board seats on the Yankton Morning Optimist Club, Yankton Area Mental Wellness Planning Committee, South Dakota Human Services Center, South Dakota Association of Fundraising Professionals, and the Avera Sacred Heart Planning Advisory Committee. My sense of service began when I was so warmly welcomed in this community in 2009 when I came to attend Mount Marty College, and you can see the old logos up there that I'm sure the marketing department thought they got rid of. But my service learning connected me with the Boys and Girls Club, where I quickly found a passion in helping foster positive values in underserved youth. In 2016, this passion carried on to serving people of all ages with Pathway Shelter for the Homeless. And over the next 8 years, the passion developed into making connections and collaborations for efficient services across the greater Yankton region, and in some cases throughout the entire state of South Dakota. So over the last 15 years, I've learned the importance nonprofits play in communities, the critical need for cross-sector collaboration, and how optimism can truly bring light on the dark situation. Currently, I have the privilege and great responsibility of serving as the executive director of our local United Way. It's a small picture, but I want to point out the rest of the team who makes coming to work each day so enjoyable. We have Tom Kurtenbach, who many of you know as the past fire chief. He connects volunteers with opportunities throughout the community. Amanda Hansen diligently runs all of our internal programs, and Betsy Semler, who spearheads our fundraising efforts. Today I'm here to discuss the state of the nonprofit sector in the greater Yankton area. And I'd like to point out that the term nonprofit encompasses a wide variety of entities. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll focus mostly on the state of nonprofits, of direct service agencies under the United Way umbrella. While United Way does not speak directly for any agency other than itself, on average we provide funding to and engage closely with 30 separate organizations throughout each year. In preparing for today, I reached out to all United Way partner agencies and about 10 others outside of our umbrella, and I asked for their feedback regarding the views as they pertain to their agencies of the current times. I hope to paint a clear picture of what they're all seeing and experiencing. So we'll cover philanthropic values of Yankton and how funding has changed over the years, the importance of collaboration, and some recent examples of organizations partnering for the greater good, and look at ways that we need to improve moving forward. So before we dive into philanthropy, I'd like to first clarify the definition that we're using. The etymology behind the word itself and the philosophy of philanthropy is interesting, to me at least, so if you have a few minutes, take some time and look it up. The modern understanding of philanthropy is technically viewed as a separate idea from charity, although the two are often considered to be the same. Looking at that definition, charity refers to providing immediate relief and support in times of crisis, addressing pressing issues and offering assistance to individuals and communities in need. Now, I believe when people think of the word philanthropy as it applies to our community, this would describe a lot of our service agencies. Now, philanthropy takes a broader view and aims to address the root cause of social problems. Now, because I've spent so much time working closely with a wide range of our agencies in the community, I know that this is also a part of their missions. Not only do they want to meet the needs, they want to address the root cause to eradicate the issues. It's a daunting task. Both are important. So the definition is a lot simpler and encompasses both words, is giving gifts of time, talent, and treasure to help make life better for other people. So for the purpose of our conversation today, we'll focus on definition number 3. So I'd like to look at those 3 pieces of philanthropy and how I've seen them take place within our community. So with 15 years of nonprofit experience in Yankton, I've managed and directed thousands of volunteers in varying capacities. While staff are the heart and soul of organizations, the workers on the front lines, the boots on the ground, changing lives in real time, quite often nonprofits don't have the resources they need to do all of the work required to effectively run an organization. So I encourage you to go into any nonprofit and ask what they're lacking. I guarantee there's a gap to be filled. This could be plumbing, marketing, fundraising, painting, basic maintenance, the list goes on. So often it has become common understanding that nonprofit workers are expected to be the unicorns. They're expected to wear all the hats and do all the things. That means that they're using their talents and skills to perform duties outside of their job descriptions and qualifications. Every nonprofit job description I've seen has a clause that says, and other duties as required. Maybe that's common in any industry. I haven't seen a for-profit job description since 2009, so you can tell me if I'm wrong. Regardless, most nonprofit workers have bleeding hearts. They care so much for the mission that they'll do whatever they need to save the organization funds and ensure that they're meeting that mission. While this is noble and appreciated in many cases, it can lead to putting temporary band-aids on growing issues that will ultimately be more expensive to fix down the road. So I'd like to share two examples of collective volunteerism that we see throughout the community that have a huge impact. The first, as you see it up there, is United Way's efforts. United Way has been connecting local volunteers with service opportunities for many years, hence the name Volunteer Services in our name, or since the phrase Volunteer Services in our name. Each year in June, we hold a Day of Caring event where we link often hundreds of volunteers with agencies who have projects that they've been putting off simply due to lack of time or lack of resources to complete them. We'll be sharing information about that very soon, so stay tuned. Another leading example is right here on this campus. When I attended Mount Marty, there was a service learning requirement, or at least I had one, and I don't believe all students had that. Also, I don't recall the deep encouragement of supporting the community. I've had the pleasure of witnessing them embrace and uplift their Benedictine values over the years, specifically the two applicable to this topic, community living and hospitality. By holding a campus-wide mission day at the beginning of each fall semester where they send out faculty and students into masses to help with projects throughout the community. This momentum carries throughout the school year by students performing service learning and internships with area organizations. And whenever there's a need, you can bet that Mount Marty's presence will be felt in some way. This is a large reason why the Mount Marty University student body was selected as United Way's January Volunteers of the Month. Now, looking at talents, I view talents as professional in-kind services such as accounting, marketing, graphic design, advertising, or even trade skills like plumbing, electrical work, or general construction. Places like Pathway Shelter for the Homeless, River City Domestic Violence Center, or even Heartland Humane Society, who provide emergency shelter to households or animals, they have a huge need for trade skills. When you've taken on the responsibility of providing a safe and dignified space for people to get back on track with their lives, there's a duty to repair things as quickly as possible. I know that I spent much more time than I wanted crawling underneath the building of pathways to fix leaking pipes. That was simply because plumbers are in high demand and short supply. And when it happens often, those costs add up very well, and nonprofits don't have a large maintenance budget typically. Professional skills like accounting, bookkeeping, advertising are in high demand as well. Oftentimes, as mentioned before, directors of nonprofits in this community are expected to do all of those things. It's not common that you'll find someone willing and qualified to be the fundraiser, service provider, case manager, marketer, supervisor, public relations, and maintenance for the salary that most agencies are able to provide. That often leads to burnout, which we'll talk about later. This is where in-kind services are crucial. A director needs to learn their strengths, focus their efforts in those areas, and find community support for the rest. While this may sound like common sense, it happens all too often in our local agencies, and I've been guilty of it myself. In the same breath, businesses offering these professional services have to make a living as well. I've witnessed much generosity from this area of the community, not necessarily offering services for free, but at least at a heavily discounted rate. When I was with Pathways, Bolenberg-Ritzman provided their expert accounting services at a very affordable rate, and many different trade services offered their expertise for only the cost of materials and donated the labor. A more recent example is with United Way and our clothing closet program. Servant Hearts Clinic, who is a United Way partner agency, has allowed us to use their building rent-free since 2019 when we moved in. And that honestly made the program possible with that reduced overhead costs. With the recent move of the clothing closet to the Community Impact Center, we had to do some work to make the space more dignified and welcoming. So Floor Tech and Ace Hardware came together to offer a heavily discounted price to clean the floors, put a nice epoxy down to make that concrete last, and then we used some donated paint from Ace Hardware to give the walls new life. Talking about treasures, I have witnessed some amazing examples of individuals and entities sharing their treasures over the years. Again, my first example is right here on this campus. The Benedictine sisters actually fit the bill for any amazing thing you can say about anybody. I think we all know the presence that they have in the community. For the purpose of this presentation, they also fit in that volunteer category. A sister holds a board seat on, I believe, every United Way partner agency. In addition, they offer monetary support to a majority of them as well. Also, they have their Benedictine Service Fund, which, through which they support one-time requests for various initiatives. I've had the privilege of applying for 2 of those and receiving them in the past, which were instrumental in carrying out our agency's mission. The next example is likely no surprise to anyone. First Dakota National Bank has made their presence known in the many communities they serve, and most importantly, right here in Yankton. As a company, they have made philanthropy a core value, contributing to countless projects throughout the community, amounting to millions of dollars given back. Their support of United Way steadily increased each year, and this was my first year witnessing that. Almost all employees make a contribution to the Community Impact Fund. On top of this, the employees hold internal challenges throughout the year, and they donate that to different area nonprofits. They deserve every ounce of recognition they receive. And if you read yesterday's article in the paper, they have a couple of announcements coming up regarding more large donations. So I have to point out the picture in the bottom left, that is our vehicle. It does say First Dakota on the back. No, I don't work for First Dakota. I have to answer that a lot. My family was a recipient of their and the community's generosity in 2022 when they celebrated their 150th anniversary. So, now that you know what vehicle I drive, you see that around. If you see it doing something that upsets you, like cuts you off, doesn't use your blinker, that's my wife driving, not me. I'm kidding. She's an excellent driver. That's just been brought up enough, I felt the need to say it. But just another example of their generosity to the community. Lastly, I have to mention Jean D. Smith. Many of you might remember her. She passed away in 2021. She shared a substantial amount of wealth with 5 different nonprofits in the community. At the time, I was with Pathways, and we felt that was a savior to us and allowed us to add some much-needed services and stability that we were lacking. So please know there are so many banks, manufacturing companies, small businesses, healthcare organizations, educational institutions, and individuals that are generous with their time, talents, and treasures to our entire nonprofit community. It's simply not realistic for me to include everyone in this short amount of time. So as we begin to look at how funding has changed over the years, I want to briefly cover how United Way's grants operate, and it'll explain how and why we receive donations. As I've done presentations throughout the years, it's become apparent that not many people know that works. The largest pool of grant dollars that United Way has is called the Community Impact Grant, or the Community Impact Fund. This is distributed in equal monthly disbursements during the calendar year to agencies that applied the previous year. This grant is due by August 1st. Then the United Way Allocations Committee carefully reviews the grant applications, grading them based on the impact data we provided. Now this is important because data is more than just numbers. It's a pathway to visibility and support for those who have been overlooked. It's a way to ensure that agencies receiving our community's treasures or investments are being used appropriately and effectively. And we at United Way pride ourselves on taking that responsibility very seriously. We also communicate with Connecting Cultures to ensure that equitable decisions are being made. Once the decisions are made internally, the agencies and community are informed of those decisions so they can prepare the budgets. Then United Way has to raise those dollars. So this is different across the board with United Ways. Some raise the money first and then allocate it. Others, like us, allocate the funds and then go raise it. So common sense speaking, it would sure reduce a lot of stress and anxiety if you raise it first and give what you have. We decided to do the opposite. We're looking at actually how we might transition to the other way of operating in the future. that would be some work for our partner agencies and us alike. Oh, I'm gonna go ahead off, I'll leave it there. The community impact funds are flexible, meaning they can be used towards any cost associated with the programs that the agencies applied for in the grant. And that's important because many grants and donor advised funds will not cover these important costs, like salaries, utilities, any overhead. Oftentimes, donors want to provide gifts for more attractive items like new buildings, equipment, supplies, things that they can put their name on. In my mind, the nonprofit is the expert in how the funding should be spent. As a boots on the ground staff for many years, the ideology behind not wanting a donation to go towards my salary and the things that we're doing that's making change was hard to understand. As I matured and I understand that there's a spot for all types of donations in the nonprofit world. My advice to this crowd is to do your research, speak with the representatives of the agencies to which you want to give, so you can fully trust them to spend your treasures wisely with no strings attached. In addition to our Community Impact Fund, United Way hosts 2 venture grant cycles throughout the year, the first in May and the second in November. These are one-time funds for startup costs, program expansions, and mental health initiatives. Now, the money used to offer these venture grants comes from 2% of the previous year's Community Impact Fund and 50% of the proceeds raised by the Bridging Yankton Committee. The other 50% of the Bridging Yankton funds goes to benefit the Helpline Center's suicide prevention efforts throughout the state. Again, same format that the Community Impact Fund follows. The United Way Allocations Committee meets in conjunction with Connecting Cultures, and this time with the Bridging Yankton team as they work so hard to raise those funds to decide which grants are provided. So now that we kind of know how United Way's funding mechanism works, let's talk about trends. Across the globe, United Ways are seeing the need now, more than ever, to diversify funding sources. In fact, at last week's Midwest Regional Conference, the United Way Worldwide CEO, along with the United Way Worldwide Board President, it's a mouthful, shared that this is the most difficult time in United Way history. For them to say that for an organization that was founded in 1887, 138 years ago, that's an impactful statement. To say that the present is more difficult than the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and countless other conflicts that we've seen over the years, that's an intimidating thought. Historically, United Way's most effective fundraising mechanism was through workplace campaigns. United Ways are typically given access to workplaces, both large and small, and with many focuses, from education to manufacturing to healthcare. And we're able to present to the employees of these entities and encourage them to give their gifts by payroll deduction. This is considered one of the easiest ways to give, as you can set it up at the beginning of the campaign cycle and then forget about it until the next year. Many people donate $1, $3, $5 per paycheck, and when you multiply that by thousands of employees throughout a community, that has a huge impact. Over the past few years, as corporations have merged and acquisitions have taken place, we're seeing less participation from manufacturers that have headquarters outside of our region. That sense of community is slowly changing. So the chart here shows, the next 3 charts will show trends over the past 5 years. So in the past 5 years, local employee participation has dropped by 20%. You can see how it's kind of ebbed and flowed. The decrease from 2023 to 2024 was the steepest, at just under $100,000. So as I've already experienced in the first year of my role, this is not always a reliable source of fundraising. When an employee no longer works for a company, it's not a top priority for them or the business to inform United Way that they've moved on. And rightfully so. They have more pressing matters like finding a new job, hiring a new employee, or perhaps that person is retired. Regardless, the donation is lost, and we don't find out until months after it takes place. That being said, we wholeheartedly appreciate the businesses in our community that allow us to participate in this way, as it still makes up a majority of the campaign dollars. We'll continue to give a great deal of effort continuing these partnerships. Now, the second category we focus on is corporate giving. These are considered any gifts that come directly from a corporation that aren't tied to any employee decision. These have dipped slightly over the past 5 years, but they've slowly been rising again, showing only a 2% decrease. Looking back at the numbers, I've seen some corporations stop giving altogether, oftentimes because they've been bought out and there's no longer that community connection, and some others have increased, leading to just that slight decrease. So again, it's ebbing and it's flowing. The third main group from whom we see financial support are the individual and retired community. These are individuals who are not tied to an employer of any type. The numbers here have followed a different pattern than the previous examples. It rose sharply after the pandemic and then fell back down in 2023 and then slightly increased again last year. So we see a 12% decrease in individual retired giving over the past 5 years. And I don't have a direct explanation for this, being only 1 year into this, other than I know that some folks have unfortunately passed away, they're no longer giving their annual contribution, or perhaps they moved on to a different community. This is a trend we're going to follow heavily moving forward. So over the past 15 years, I've witnessed the ebbs and flows of giving based on the current economic status of our country or the uncertainty of political climates. Every election cycle, companies of various trades will put freezes on hiring, or they'll stop making donations temporarily, simply because they're waiting to see how the economy is gonna react. For this reason, I believe the need for secure funding sources needs to be a focus of our entire nonprofit community. Endowments, if large enough, are stable sources of funding that one can rely on year after year, and they are not very common, at least in Yankton. While it may not cover 100% of an agency's fundraising needs, and it may vary year to year based on the economy, generally it can drastically reduce the amount of resources an entity needs to put towards fundraising, which they can then use to focus directly serving their mission. So let's just take a $1 million endowment. On average, an agency pulls between 3 and 5% from that endowment each year. That's, for this sake of this presentation, we'll say 5%. That's $50,000 into the agency's pocket that they can use for whatever their needs are. That might not seem like a lot, but that's enough to about cover a staff position at any agency in town. Or that's an entire year's worth of utility costs. It makes a huge impact. This is a large focus of our United Way moving forward. If we can establish a healthy endowment, it will allow us to continue funding at the same level while competing less with other partner agencies for community resources. Speaking of partners, let's move on to collaborations. Few nonprofits have long-term funding that's secure. As I mentioned before, many nonprofit workers have bleeding hearts, and they'll do everything it takes to serve their mission. Oftentimes, this includes expanding and adding programs that serve the mission. Historically, Yankton's been a very caring community, so much so, they're so caring, in fact, that people have gotten so excited about whatever idea they've had, they jump right into it and forget to check if that service already exists. Or they have different opinions on how a program should be run, so they branch out and they begin their own program. In traditional business and many other aspects of life, competition is healthy. In my opinion, that's not true for the nonprofit world. Every organization has overhead costs that we briefly mentioned before. Rent, utilities, payroll, supplies, to name a few. When a new nonprofit is created, one has to factor in all of those costs and the overall impact that it will have on community resources. Nonprofits don't typically have an ongoing revenue stream from selling a product, so they rely entirely on the ability to fundraise. So if someone has an idea for a nonprofit, a new program, or even a support group, these are the top questions I recommend they answer. Does it fill an unmet need in the community or region? Is there an agency providing the same or similar service? If so, is there an opportunity to partner or collaborate with them? If not, does this idea fit into an existing agency's mission, and are they willing to take it on? And if we make it to that point, the question becomes, is this a sustainable idea? Does our community have the resources to keep this program going long term? Now, as we discussed with decreased funding and a growing number of funding requests, this is the reason that nonprofits need to trim the fat as much as possible and find ways to collaborate for the greater good. When talking about this, I like to use the analogy of eating a steak. When I cut a piece of steak out to take a bite, I don't want to have much, if any, fat on that bite. So I trim the fat off and take the bite. Similarly, donors and grantors often don't want to be giving to an agency that has wasteful spending habits or that's doing the same thing that another agency is doing down the road, especially in the same community. A majority of grant applications want real examples of how an agency has collaborated before they even consider a funding request. So United Way has been a promoter of collaboration and streamlined services for years. For the sake of time, I want to lift up some other examples that may not be as well known to the public. My intention with this page was to make it as cluttered and overwhelming and obnoxious as possible. The amount of connections and partnerships in this community truly is astounding. I could never list the many wonderful and inspirational partnerships that I've seen over the years. I'll select a few and point them out here. So when I was with Pathways, we were constantly receiving inquiries for help for services that we didn't provide. We had to give someone a list of addresses to go to or numbers to call where they had explained their situation over and over again. For someone without transportation or a cell phone and who is likely going through a crisis, that's a terrible situation to put someone in, have them go through that trauma over and over. So we brought together entities that were often giving and receiving referrals and created a shared Google Drive document. I think by now most people know what Google Drive is. This allowed all of us to communicate digitally, meaning much more quickly, and it allowed us to see who was receiving what from which agency, and that helped prevent duplication. Now Now that method lacked a sense of security and confidentiality. And along came Unitus, which was a national startup from the East Coast that allowed us to do that same thing, but with confidentiality and a few nice missing aspects. That worked great for a while, and at one point we had over 40 different programs participating. However, we had a hard time getting some of the key players on board due to CFR 42 and HIPAA codes, so confidentiality, privacy. And the program was never as robust as it could be. Now, there's a system called Nexus that's making its way through our state, which was created by the Helpline Center. That's been adopted at the state level and is gaining traction with more key players like healthcare and education systems. And we're hoping that Nexus will make its way down to Yankton to be able to create that true network of care that will allow service providers to work more efficiently, will allow less people to fall through the cracks. Oops, don't do that yet. Connecting Cultures, many of you have heard of. They're another group that has made their positive collaborations known. Their mission is to create connections that cultivate a community that celebrates cultural diversity in Yankton. And the group's values include everyone deserves a voice, an educated community strong, and all cultures should be celebrated. They were the recipients of United Way's Collaboration of the Year Award in 2023, and that group has bridged the community together, including businesses and service providers, to be more mindful of inclusion and accessibility practices. Another example is the Yankton School District and Lewis and Clark Behavioral Health Systems of Care. Those programs have teamed up to ensure that they're meeting the needs of the most vulnerable youth in our community. And the same could be said of the Child Protection Team, which involves representatives of numerous service agencies, school districts, law enforcement, state offices, and more. And the reason we're here today is because of the collaborative efforts of multiple service groups, bringing people together to hear an important message. I have to mention Yankton Thrive as well, who, for their involvement in so many different aspects of the community, for-profit, non-profit alike. Lastly, the Yankton Ministerial Association, I've had so many partnerships with over the years, but that's led by Pastor Jeff Todd with Celebrate Church, Pastor Jeff Otterman with Trinity Lutheran, Pastor Dan Joe Bierwagen with Christ the King, Pastor Jan Volsky with Faith Alive, Pastor Eric Watts with New Life Church, and all of their congregations. Those are all members of the religious community that pushed their doctrine aside and came together for our community's better good. And that was so uplifting. They were always there when we needed to talk. There are so many others that I haven't mentioned, and I'm sure even some of the best examples, but these are all shining models of why it's so important to be willing to at least be at the table and be a part of the conversation. So talking about collaboration takes us into our next topic regarding themes we're seeing in the nonprofit community and how we can improve moving forward. Historically, United Ways were, in many communities, the sole provider of funds for whichever agencies were requesting funds, meaning they provided 100% of an agency's budget. Therefore, United Way has become to be known as the trusted source to donate in the community. For that reason, United Ways issued a blackout period, where no agencies who received United Way funding were allowed to carry out any fundraising efforts. Our local United Way's blackout period has historically been September 1st to November 1st. Over time, the level of giving and the need for funding has grown disproportionately. This has led organizations having to fundraise on their own to ensure that they each had their own budget, each could meet their budget to carry out their missions. In 2025, United Way's Community Impact Fund is supporting 23 separate organizations that run 67 programs focusing on the areas of health, education, and financial stability. And I want to point out that 13 of those programs are run internally by United Way staff. The collective budget of these agencies is just over $8.6 million. Our campaign goal is $700,000 this year, and we're only fulfilling 8% of that overall budget. It's not realistic for us to keep asking these agencies to take a back seat for 2 months. Many United Ways have moved away from the idea of blackout periods entirely. After polling partner agencies and donors, our United Way will join that trend and eliminate the blackout period altogether before the next funding cycle. Instead, we'll simply ask United Way funded partner agencies to participate in a fundraising calendar. Source yet to be determined, as we need to discuss with the existing community calendars. Collaborate, don't duplicate, and we'll encourage all entities holding fundraisers to use that in hopes to avoid as much overlap as possible. Inevitably, in a community of our size, there are going to be congruent events. At best, we can filter our community's treasures to agencies more easily. At worst, this will encourage more communication in the fundraising community. And I know from experience that over-communication is better than none at all. current issue that we've been seeing, not only at the nonprofit level, is COVID funding going away. I know that many of our local nonprofits benefited from temporary government-sponsored COVID funding, both state and federal, to help with a variety of needs. Those funds are drying up and disappearing, leaving agencies to determine how they're going to fill the gaps that that funding will leave. On the topic of funding, with the new federal administration, we're seeing other funds potentially leaving our community. And so far, I have 3 examples of this. Lutheran Social Services Center for New Americans is at risk of having to close their Yankton office, which is in United Way's Community Impact Center. A federal grant was pulled that funded that program, which provides crucial case management services to immigrants who are here legally, employed in our community, and are navigating the immigration process. LSS has dipped into their reserves as much as possible, and ultimately made the difficult decision that without any secure additional funding, they can't continue with Yankton Satellite Office, among others. Fortunately, a group of community entities have come together and have found a way to keep that office open for the time being. They're still exploring options for ongoing secure funding. South Dakota Voices for Peace is another entity who lost some funding. They employ a community health worker who also holds an office in our building and provides those crucial case management services to the legal immigrant population. Now that employee is still here, but has endured a payroll cut, so she's working less hours. With both of these examples, I can compare to the importance of their continuation to how Yankton has felt the effect of not having a go-to location for the navigation of community services. Because this didn't exist at one point, many agencies developed their own internal case management programs and navigation process, each spending thousands of dollars each year on training and employees, in some cases providing false information to those in need due to the outdated resources. While that was a necessity and it has proven to be worthwhile in many cases, it could have been potentially avoided by better collaboration at the time. With this current situation, take the already difficult issue of navigating community services and add a language barrier. It's less than ideal situation and one with which we need to take action. The third example is our United Way. We were notified last Friday that we are losing federal funding that we have been receiving for the last 6 years, amounting to $80,000 annually. So we've been asked by the federal agency not to make a public comment on this until April 8th, when they make nationwide announcements, so I won't name the organization, but what are they gonna do, cut our funding further? Anyway, we'll make a public announcement once we have to go ahead and do so. But that brings me to my next point. Sustainability is key. You have to remember sustainability. So when I asked our partner agencies and area service providers to share their top 3 needs as seen through the lens of their agencies, there were so many themes that I couldn't bring only 3 to this presentation. I'll spend just a brief amount of time on a couple of these. So of course, when you ask a nonprofit what they need, number one thing, more funding, always. And that makes sense. Burnout of staff and volunteers. This goes in line with what I shared earlier regarding the nonprofit unicorn and staff doing more than their job duties to meet the mission. With volunteers, oftentimes the same person is a giver, and they're asked to do the same thing or other things over and over again, and eventually they burn out, they grow tired, they need to step away. More engaged and trained board members and volunteers. In 15 years, I've seen the same people rotate, many of the same people rotate from nonprofit to nonprofit. In some cases, these individuals are fantastic and go above and beyond with each board. Naturally though, our lives change. We grow tired, we take on additional responsibilities at work, at home, we can't give time like we used to. Our lives have seasons. Sometimes just because a person works for a particular company or has a particular set of skills or knowledge, doesn't mean that they make a great board member. In a community of our size, it can be difficult to continually find adequate board representation depending on the nonprofit's needs. We already touched on more professional and in-kind services. With access to information and services, both donor and client related, I want to touch on this. When talking about donor access to information, it can be difficult for someone that wants to donate something, whatever it is, when they don't know what the best avenue is. There really isn't a community resource guide for donating certain items. Or if there is, it exists in a bubble and it's not readily available. When referring to client access to information and services, it can be very difficult to find a solution to a problem when you lack necessary resources, especially if you're in a crisis, as we mentioned before. As I mentioned, there isn't a set centralized location where one can gain this information. Many, if not all, agencies under the United Way umbrella are expert navigators, and they know how to direct somebody and where to go, how to solve a problem from a physical aspect. Although Yankton isn't that big, getting around can be difficult if you don't have a set of wheels. It takes 2 hours to walk from the far east side of town all the way up to the Department of Labor. Our community has a great organization in Southeast Public Transit, formerly known as Yankton Transit, and they're available at certain times, but they are, again, a nonprofit and their resources are limited. The only other option is taxis, and those are not affordable. So there's a gap in transportation services. Also, some service providers are not able to operate at hours that are convenient for the clients, mainly due to lack of resources. We've touched on overlapping services and need for collaboration. Language barriers, for the sake of time, we'll just say that this is felt across the community and is somewhat self-explanatory, although it deserves a lot more attention than what I'm giving it. And a deeper engagement from the local business community. The nonprofit leader who shared this with me provided a comment with it, and I'll share it. I believe that person's name is anonymous, just to further privacy. When businesses recognize the intersection between social services and economic vitality, whether through a stable workforce, reduced absenteeism due to personal crises, or a stronger local economy, they become more invested partners in building a thriving region. It's a powerful statement. Looking at this list, I feel there are some tangible opportunities for reflection and growth as a community. I see more listed several times. Before we can determine that more of anything is the answer, our nonprofit community needs to take a deep look in the mirror and reflect on the sustainability of our programs. We need to have some uncomfortable and important conversations regarding overlapping services and any programs that lack accountability. At all levels, if we keep protecting someone's discomfort, they will never learn to grow and be sustainable on their own. Again, we want to meet the basic needs, charity, and more importantly, we want to eradicate the source of the issue, philanthropy. So as time goes on, we will likely see more federal funding disappear, and it's not a safe practice to assume that our community can pick up the slack, at least in all cases. At this point, being new in this role, I'm not sure that United Way can be the answer for more. The largest campaign in United Way history was from the 2019 to 2020 year, just before COVID hit, when they raised $721,000. It struggled to get back to that level in recent years, although we're creeping up on it this year with that $700,000 goal. And side note, if you haven't donated to United Way yet this year, you still have plenty of time. Or the other amazing nonprofits in our community. I truly believe, from my conversations with the driven people doing this important work throughout our community, that there are areas we can work together to better serve the public, reduce costs, and stretch the treasures of our community far enough so that we can maintain stability even in uncertain times. It somewhat kills me inside to repeat this, but someone once said to me that sometimes less is more. This may be a part of the answer to staff and volunteer burnout, or so many nonprofits fighting to stay in the black. Let's find what's sustainable, cut the fat, and move forward together by filling gaps with collaborative solutions. One initiative with which United Way is involved is called Resilient Communities. I am not the person to be spearheading this conversation. This is a very brief overview, but it's too important not to share. This involves the scientific research behind adverse childhood experiences and the effects they have on the upbringing and outcome of people, leading to how a community functions. If we can educate our entire community on this topic, the hope is that by reducing ACEs in our children, they will grow up to engage in less risky behaviors, which positively affects the overall community in countless ways. When we release information about this in the future, I encourage you to embrace it and join the conversation. It's been eye-opening for me, especially when I look at the statistics of other communities who have already been involved in this process. So today, we covered the philanthropic values of Yankton and how funding has changed over the years, discussed the importance of collaboration and some tangible evidence of why it's so important and where we can improve as a community. So storytelling is an important piece of raising awareness. It's simply not possible for me to share every experience that I've witnessed in my time in this field. Please know that if I didn't mention you, your company, your organization, it was not intentional. Furthermore, if you have an experience that you've had in your own personal philanthropy and you want to share it, I would love to hear it. My contact information is up there. I'd love to grab coffee and have a chat. I know that many of us right now, especially those in my circle in the nonprofit world, are feeling like the glass is just about empty. I'm a true optimist though. We have a duty as a community to find the right faucet, turn it on, and fill up the cups of those serving our most vulnerable, so they can see the glass is half full. The sun will rise tomorrow, just as it did today, and as we have through any other tumultuous event in our community's history, we will rise to the occasion and come out stronger together on the other side. Thanks for listening.
You got time for a question or two, Jesse, from
Yeah,
anybody?
Absolutely. Vic, you saw your hand up first, I think.
Yeah, we want to touch on the 2025 that you're trying to fundraise this month. Is that for last year, to complete last year's campaign?
Correct, yeah, it's the 2025 campaign. Our campaign has 2 years every year, so it starts in 2024 and goes into the following year. So we're raising the money right now that we are giving to agencies throughout 2025. We have about 60,000 left of that goal to raise. So we aim to be done with that by March 31st. We have the great grocery giveaway going on as the last class. So you can buy you can donate in amounts of 25 or more and get tickets entered into that for a chance to win a $2,025 gift card to Hy-Vee. That's an easy way to give a chance at winning something yourself. But the goal is to obviously reach that 700,000 or more. That's the money that we've already promised out to the community. Question? Yes, Keith?
We appreciate your work, the Rotary Club really appreciated your work in Pathways. We thought that was a very good return on investment for the community because you did that. When you allocate money to the various organizations who apply, is there a template that you use? And I guess as it stands, how much of a sales job from those organizations helps them get money? So I guess as far as when those applications come, is it a sales job or is it just a matter of how well they present themselves?
Well, and as I mentioned, I'll refer back to that. It's all data driven. So they have to prove that they are having an impact in our community and at what level. So the agencies that have the most impact are the agencies that are given the most dollars. And obviously there's a scale. There are some agencies where we fund 100% of their budget because they only have a $2,000 budget. It might be a small program requesting funds. However, organizations like Pathways or River City that have large budgets, and there's others too, Boys and Girls Club, we couldn't realistically provide that much to them, so it's kind of a ratio in that perspective. We have to spread the wealth as much as possible.
And as far as United Way International, how much of a template do they give you to know how you have to operate or can't operate so you don't reinvent the wheel?
We have the flexibility to operate as long as we're meeting those 3 pillars to educate, as long as the agencies we're providing funding to fall within the education, financial stability, or health. It's very flexible on how we decide that the funding is distributed. They have a lot of resources for us, and the EC Impact is an application software that we use to collect these applications, and that was created by a partnership with United Way Worldwide.
So it's somewhat helpful then.
It's very helpful, yeah. We give 1.2% of our annual campaign funds to United Way Worldwide to keep this affiliation fee. Our board of directors, it's in our bylaws that they cover that, so that way all funds that come from the community stay right here in Yankton, which is a wonderful thing. But that's a worthwhile affiliation to keep. Other questions?
Jesse, I might add that this has been quite a week here just in the Yankton community. Brian, what did they raise at the Rockathon at the
$77,000.
That's like a record, I think, by far, right? 77,000 there. And if you weren't aware, I don't know, hope you did find it somewhere in the media or out in the world. Giving Day for Mount Marty was Tuesday and Wednesday this week, and that's about $100,000. So they're at $177,000 just in a few days by this community. I've always said, I'm sure other communities can say this or want to say it, being a philanthropic community. By the way, college students don't understand the word philanthropy. I'm telling you the story, they don't know that word. You have to tell them what that is. And they've all benefited from, somewhere in their life, they've benefited from charity or philanthropy, but the word philanthropy, not in the vocabulary. Not that they can't understand it, but it's not there, so we need to continue to educate on those needs for that. But I always said Mount Marty or Yankton itself, since we've lived here, it's just been a great community. When there's a need, it seems to step up. But I certainly learned a few things today with some numbers that could be challenging for our community. I have no doubt we'll step up and figure that out. But Let's thank Jesse one more time. Thank you, Jesse. And again, thank you for coming, being part of these series of 4 or 5, however you want to look at these fifth session. That I apologize that I was not there, but it was joined. But the service group's working together, and again, the goal of what making Yankton better. So, thanks on behalf of coming to Mount Marty. I hope you enjoyed the setting, and I think if the recipe works, we'll try it again next year for everyone. So, have a good rest of your day, good week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.